after I watched the video, I went online to see how people were feeling about this.
Sure.
And it was a bit more of a mixed reaction than I was expecting. That certainly didn't match my own experience. I was really excited by this and I thought it was great, but there were still a lot of people saying feels like DLC, or I'm not getting that special feeling I did with the first game, or is there really nothing new on the ground level? And this was mixed with a lot of people being really excited and really liking what they saw. But I'm just wondering, like, for those skeptical fans, was this enough?
One of the things I like to do with my channel when entering a new gaming community is I try to analyze and understand minority perspectives in that community. And I like making videos describing those minority perspectives in a fair way to the rest of that community's population. And so this current controversy going on with Tears of the Kingdom is not new to me. In fact, something remarkably similar happens in every community that I've been in. The same kind of discussions repeat with the same talking points. When I covered Elden Ring heavily, there were a large number of people that didn't like Elden Ring coming up to release and even after release. There were a lot of people that insisted it was the worst of the series. That Elden Ring's open world was empty and barren. That there was huge gaps with nothing to do between spaces. When I was covering Monster Hunter, there were a great deal of old Monster Hunter fans that felt that the 5th generation of Monster Hunter ruined the series. And there were even people that came in at the beginning of the 5th generation with Monster Hunter World that felt the same way about Monster Hunter Rise. Of course, each of these controversies has been different, and I've landed in different places depending on which game we're talking about. There's a lot of room for nuanced conversation on these topics, and it's rarely as simple as new thing good, old thing bad, or vice versa. I really enjoy shining a light at these pre-release conversations that happen. And the one for Tears of the Kingdom right now might be the most interesting, because I believe that the minority population in this controversy is the largest minority population I've ever seen. After the gameplay showcase, I put up a poll asking, are you happy with what was shown for Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? I released this poll before I made a video on it, so that my opinion wouldn't contaminate the results. And what's interesting about the results is that if you combine the no and the meh answers, then a full 40% of people are unimpressed with what's been shown for Tears of the Kingdom so far. And that's a staggering result. I've been doing these polls for a while, and I keep a close eye on other people that do polls like these. And I've never had a result like this, especially not at the month before release time period. This is the time period where hype is usually the strongest, and people will defend their preferred game well past the point of reason. This is the time period where usually fans are the most dogmatically loyal. Yet my current experience is not typical. When I go and check online, I find that there's a lot of complaints, or there's a lot of complaints about how much complaints they're seeing. And there are other people noticing this, like the guy shown at the start of this video. I do still think that the people disappointed are a minority, but they're a sizable minority. And I think the biggest I've seen so far. So, in this video what I want to do is go into more detail as to why I think this is happening, what's causing this disappointment, and what kinds of people are disappointed. I did this as well in my last video, but I felt like I left too many things unsaid. My interest and understanding in this topic has gone up since yesterday. Anyway, let's just jump into it. We talked yesterday about the classic Zelda fan, so we'll only lightly touch on him today. Basically, the classic Zelda fan is just somebody who wants Tears of the Kingdom to have more classic Zelda elements than Breath of the Wild did. Some of them are just here to complain. They wouldn't be happy no matter what was introduced. And they spend their time in the comment sections just bemoaning the death of the Zelda series. But they're not all like that. Many people are simply sitting there in front of their screens looking at these trailers and just praying to see a dungeon. For many classic Zelda fans, a dungeon is all it would take to sell them on Tears of the Kingdom. For this subgroup, they know that asking to go back to the older game's linearity, at least in this installation, is unrealistic. and so their expectations and hopes have been refined to just want a dungeon. They don't feel the divine beasts were adequate replacements for dungeons, and they don't even have expectations that the dungeons themselves would be linear like dungeons were in older games. All they want is for the dungeons to exist, for them to be much larger than the divine beasts, for them to be filled with puzzles, and for each one of the dungeons to have a unique aesthetic and musical theme. And of course for there to be a cool boss at the end. Bosses that are visually distinct from one another. And that's it. That's all they want. A reasonable, classic Zelda enjoyer does not hope for more. Now before I make my next point, I need to make sure that people know I'm not going to talk about spoilers from the art book. But I will briefly need to say something in broad generalities that doesn't talk about any of the content in the book, and isn't a spoiler in even the strictest sense of the word. The reason I need to do that is because one of the common comments that I get when I talk about what the classic Zelda fans want and why they're disappointed is some people will say, I looked at the art book leak and dungeons in it are totally confirmed. And that is not true. The art book leaks do not confirm the existence of dungeons. They don't. At best, there are some pages that could imply it being the entrance to a dungeon or being inside of a dungeon, but there's nothing in that art book that comes close to confirmation of anything. And with the latest gameplay showcase, and the fact that Nintendo put so much emphasis on the weapon fusion and the Ultra Hand, classic Zelda enjoyers are now increasingly worried that dungeons are just not in the cards for them. So that's their perspective. That's why they're upset. That's why they're disappointed. But they're not alone. They're joined by another group of fans, which we also talked about yesterday. These are the Breath of the Wild fans. These are people that liked Breath of the Wild. In fact, for many of them, Breath of the Wild is their favorite Zelda game. Yet despite that, the things they've seen in the current marketing cycle have not impressed them, and in fact have caused these people that are very pro Breath of the Wild to join in the chorus of complaints and disappointment. These fans acknowledge that there are changes. They don't go so far as to call what they see glorified DLC, but they also don't think that the points of interest that they're looking at in the trailer is enough to motivate them to explore a map that largely they've explored before, some of them for 1,000 hours, even if those changes were dotted across the landscape. The fact that they're going to see many of the same vistas in this exploration is shackling them with a mental barrier. The fact that it's a previously explored location is making for these people the idea of exploring it again feel like backtracking. What's most interesting about this group is that under normal circumstances they're very well disposed towards Breath of the Wild. These are the people that would normally defend it to death. And so hearing them specifically express their concerns makes me take them seriously. Alright, let's dig into this a little deeper. I've seen two different arguments used in response to the concerned Breath of the Wild fan. The funny thing about these arguments is that they're exactly the opposite from each other, and yet I will often see it be used by the same person in different situations. The first argument is that the concerned Breath of the Wild fan is wrong to feel unimpressed, that there is certainly no problem at all, that the gameplay showcase and the trailers previous to it have actually shown a great deal, and that the changes to the overworld are actually very large and very significant. The second counter-argument that I hear in response to the concerned Zelda fan is that the reason we haven't seen very much is because Nintendo is hiding that information because they don't want us to get spoiled. That there's no way that what we've seen represents the 6 years of development time it took to make Tears of the Kingdom. That all the most interesting parts of the games are still being sequestered away from us. And that we should wait for the game to release before casting judgment, because the final product is sure to deliver. I am paraphrasing, but I think largely those explanations are an accurate representation of the defense of Nintendo and Tears of the Kingdom. And so here, let me just put forward my own perspective, which I think probably wasn't clear even in my last video. First of all, I don't agree with the first argument. I think it's perfectly reasonable to look at the latest gameplay trailer and all the trailers before it and remain skeptical and increasingly nervous. This latest trailer let us look at things more closely. And yes, there are changes, but there's also a lot that's largely the same. This is the same map, and the trailer even showed them reusing some of the music. You can clearly hear the horse theme playing as Link's riding, and the theme at the stable is also identical. I was actually really surprised by this decision. Changing the music would have been one of the easiest ways to make Tears of the Kingdom feel distinct from Breath of the Wild. But even those two pieces of music are reused. And that brings me to the second argument. The idea that Nintendo must be hiding a great deal, choosing not to market in favor of not spoiling their fanbase. And that given the fact that Nintendo is reusing so many of their assets, and already had Breath of the Wild to start with, Tears of the Kingdom must be packed with content in ways that many of us would find surprising. This argument, I think, is much more reasonable, and it's a position I've forwarded in previous videos. By all accounts, Nintendo does seem to be the rare company that cares about something like spoilers. The guy I showed off in the beginning of the video, Kit Ellis, used to be a pretty high-level employee for Nintendo, and has previously worked on the marketing for Breath of the Wild. He predicted that the Tears of the Kingdom marketing would be sparse, and that the reason for that sparseness was because Nintendo would not want to spoil Tears of the Kingdom, specifically to not spoil the player base. And so far his prediction seems to be working out. The Tears of the Kingdom marketing is the sparsest I've seen in a while. So because he's been accurate on Nintendo's marketing so far, and because of his expertise as a former high-level employee, I'm totally willing to accept that they're hiding a great deal. When I think about the fact that they've been working on it for 6 years, and they had the entirety of Breath of the Wild as a base to build on, reusing many of the same animations, mechanics, enemies, the entire Hyrule overworld, when you think of it like that, it seems inconceivable that what Nintendo is hiding is anything less than massive. Something that will elicit the feeling that people got when playing Elden Ring. The first time they realize that the map just keeps getting bigger and bigger and is so much larger than you first thought it was. Or when you first took an elevator down and realized that there's a sprawling underworld. Something along those lines. So the argument makes sense, it's logical, and it's a position I myself kind of hold. But I like to ask those people that hold that position, are you going to then turn on Tears of the Kingdom if it turns out that there's only a little bit of content that you don't really understand, and that it's not as large as 6 years of development time would suggest it would be? Are you going to express disappointment when Nintendo fails to keep promises it didn't make? Because I probably will. What I've seen so far is awesome. It actually does have me quite excited. The Fuse system is more interesting than I thought it would be. Exploring the overworld, the caves, and the Sky Islands, with the mechanics that they've introduced, is sure to be a lot of fun. But I can't lie, the latest gameplay reveal also got me nervous. It's possible that this weapon fusion and the Ultra Hand is extremely in-depth, more than it even seems. And it's possible that this is where the development time went. It might have taken them this long to be able to develop a system that lets you combine anything with anything else. And if that's the case, there's going to be a lot of people that were expecting a lot more that are going to be disappointed. And you know what? I think I'm one of those people. I've changed my mind over the course of making this video. I need a second hook. The Fuse and the Ultra Hand are cool, but that is not enough for me. I need some dungeons. I need a time travel to a past world or a dark world. I need playable Zelda, or that large underground area to be sprawling and dense, or even a thrilling story, beautifully told, or anything else that I'm not expecting, something I don't know I want. I need for the people that say that Nintendo is hiding huge amounts of things to be correct, to be really, really correct. Because I don't think there's going to be much more marketing, and I grow increasingly concerned as the fated day approaches. Anyway, that's the end of this video. I hope it's helped you understand the minority perspective on this topic. Please unsubscribe and unclick the bell notification. Please call me out in the comments for shifting my position on this topic. And if you're not alienated yet, I'm sure I'll get to you in a future video. Until then, thank you very much for watching.